what do you think of when you think of the word innovation? Now, I'm not talking about just a new feature or a new button on a product or something. I mean breakthrough innovation, something that kind of changes the way you do something. Well, if you're like most of us, you probably think of products. So here's one example. We all have one of these. Might not look exactly like this. This one looks a little ancient, but we have thermostats in our house. And for years, they've been pretty much the same. Maybe a few different features here and there, but then along comes the Nest. Maybe many of you have probably heard of this. This works, it can work through your app, it can work remotely, but it learns your patterns. It saves energy and it keeps you comfortable. And it's kind of a new modern way. It's been so successful that energy companies are even handing these out for free to save energy. You know, that's a breakthrough product. But today, I want us to think about innovation a little bit differently, not just products, but the experience. So what are experiences that really change the way something works? And how do we, as CX professionals, influence that? So think about this. We all have been in a situation where we're renting cars, and there's all sorts of steps that we have to go through. But what about this? Silvercar is a new company, maybe some of you have heard of it, where you rent cars, but not just any car. In fact, every time you rent from them, you get an Audi A4. There's no paperwork, no lines. You do it all through your app. You register, you reserve, you even open the door with your app, and you drive off and turn it back in. A new experience in car rentals. Speaking of cars, we've all been in a situation of buying cars, but did you ever think that you might be buying a car in a shopping mall? Well, Tesla thinks that that's the way to do it. And we've all been in one of these lines at the grocery. And now, many of you have probably heard of Amazon Go, a new shopping experience where as you enter the grocery, you scan your app, and then you shop, you pick up your stuff, and then you leave. And on your way out, once you check your phone, you'll see your receipt. No lines, no fuss. In fact, you might see in their window there, they call their technology just walk out technology. And it's no lines, no checkout, no kidding. So these are all innovative experiences, things that we strive for to change the game and give us a significant advantage over our competitors. My name's Pat Gibbons, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Sean Clayton and Diane Skirvin. Each of them is going to cite a case study today, and then they're going to share 10 fast-paced tips with you that talk about CX innovation. For those that have attended before, you know that we'll provide resources at the end of this, at the end of the webcast. You'll be able to download the slides. You'll also have access to a recorded version that you can share. You also know that we pack as much as we can in 30 minutes so that we respect your time and allow you to get back to work. We'd love to have your comments. Feel free to participate on Twitter using the hashtag WalkerCast. And if you have questions along the way, we welcome that. Just enter them into the chat feature. I'm going to start off by mentioning our last webcast. So for those of you that participated, you might recall that we released a new study called the CEO View of CX. Now, the reason that is so relevant to us today is that it focused, at least partially, on innovation. So in the study, one of the things that was highlighted was that those companies that are successful at CX are much more inclined to be focused on innovation and employee morale. And it comes as no surprise that CEOs of the most effective companies are far more likely to use the influence of innovation in their work. And when we talk about innovation, one of the things that came out in the study is it's not just fixing things. It's not identifying things that we just don't do that well and trying to fix them. It's developing these breakthrough experiences that can really set us apart. So with that as an introduction, let's get into these examples. And Sean, I'm going to hand it over to you first.
All right, thanks, Pat. So we're going to talk first of all about an experience that I think most of us can relate to as business people, as well as in our lives outside of the office, which is the hotel experience. So we're going to look at a case study here focused on the Courtyard by Marriott brand and how they've essentially over the last 10 years completely transformed their guest or customer experience. Digging back to the early 1980s, Courtyard was first launched as a sister brand of Marriott, and it was intended to compete with the fast-growing select service hotel category, which back then included companies like Holiday Inn and Howard Johnson. So it was a pretty Spartan design, intentionally enabled them to quickly build out these properties over the first few years. But if we fast forward to 2007, so just 10 years ago, while Courtyard had expanded to 600 properties, many of them were kind of starting to show their age, not just in terms of the physical buildings, but also the interior space. So just as the properties had stagnated and aged, the customer experience was also beginning to get very stale, from this wall-like imposing check-in counter when you arrived, through to the somewhat awkward lobby socializing area, to the rather rigid and outdated dining experience, and all of which led to declining guest satisfaction scores and financial metrics for the Courtyard brand at a time when they were facing a lot of new competition from sleek and modern competitors like Hyatt Place, Loft, and various boutique hotels, all of which was really threatening their market share. So in 2008, Marriott decided to embark on a strategy to create a new and differentiated guest experience for the Courtyard brand. To really empathize with and understand what customers actually needed, they began using an ethnographic approach to observing guests during their hotel stay. And this literally meant shadowing a guest at the start of their journey and following them all the way through check-in, even into their hotel rooms. So leveraging the insights from that observational research, they developed a set of guiding principles for the Courtyard brand and ideated potential new and differentiated customer experiences with a cross-functional internal team. That process culminated in a full-scale prototype lobby being built out of foam core in a warehouse that was then tested with customers and further refined, and that led to the first redesigned Courtyard being opened in 2009. So it was about a 2-year process from start to finish. Now, it's worth mentioning that Marriott really bet big on this initiative because this was being implemented right in the middle of the Great Recession. And the cost for just one franchise property to transform its lobby area alone was initially $1 million, and Marriott, the parent company, was contributing over $50 million to the initiative at this time. So following the new design principles, the check-in area was transformed into a much more friendly and inviting space, with those formerly alienating counters being replaced with welcome podiums to create a more personal interaction with customers when they checked in. That old-fashioned buffet was transformed into a modern dining experience with a much more casual and livelier atmosphere. Healthier and more flexible menu options were added, and of course, Starbucks coffee. Flexible, configurable seating options were created in the lobby to enable both larger group meetings and smaller, more intimate discussions with media-enabled booths. So what was the outcome of all of that transformation and investment, now that almost every Courtyard property has been converted to that new format? As a result of the new customer experience, the brand has achieved improved guest satisfaction scores, increased occupancy rates, higher revenue per available room, and significant market share gains. And in addition, the number of Courtyards has grown from 600 prior to the transformation to nearly 1,000 properties today. What's even more impressive is that the success of the Courtyard transformation has encouraged Marriott to move innovation quite literally to the center of their corporate strategy. So in 2013, Marriott opened up its Innovation Lab, which is a 10,000 square foot facility in the basement of its Bethesda, Maryland headquarters. And that Innovation Lab is now used by Marriott for rapid prototyping of new guest experiences with a really immersive format that allows their employees as well as their customers to experience and interact with new ideas firsthand, while also being able to provide instant and real-time feedback. And as the next step in their innovation focus, Just last October, Marriott launched the first ever live beta testing hotel, appropriately named Embed. So located in Charlotte, North Carolina, and open to the public, this hotel is a live innovation lab that allows Marriott to conduct rapid prototyping with paying customers and collect feedback in real time. One of the unique things about this hotel is it includes what they call beta buttons throughout the property for guests to provide instant feedback. And the results of those beta button votes are tallied on beta boards, which are large digital displays that show the top ideas for Marriott to look at and examine in real time. So that was just a quick overview of how the hotel experience has been transformed by one company. I'm going to hand over to Diane now to talk about a different aspect of the travel journey.
Thanks, John. So this particular case study is really about how customers engage in the airport experience. So we've all had bad airport experiences, whether that be long lines, seeing old facilities, or even a lack of cleanliness. So the London City Airport is tackling many of these pain points and more, and is really focused on transforming the customer experience. So a little bit of background first on the London City Airport. It's the only airport in London that's actually situated in the city itself. And while it's quite small compared to its larger counterpart like Heathrow, it is growing in popularity among travelers as they seek a more connected airport that's closer to the city and where they work, and also connected to public transportation. What's unique about this airport is while it's scaling and growing to meet the increasing customer demand, it's making a lot of its business decisions and changes while keeping in mind the ultimate goal to provide a speedy and premier passenger experience. And in fact, they've developed a set of promises to have a door-to-gate journey time of about 20 minutes. And then for those that are arriving into the airport, that they're going from the gate to the train in just a short 15 minutes. So how are they doing all of this? How are they delivering an ultimate customer experience? They are investing heavily in technology to enable what they are calling a smart airport experience, which leverages new and state-of-the-art technologies to enhance that passenger journey throughout the airport. This includes developing or adding crowd sensing hardware to capture and analyze different traffic patterns of how customers are going through the airport, different phases of the journey, and how they're utilizing that space. And all of this data that they're collecting here is used to inform staffing decisions, making sure they've got the right people in the right places, making investment and infrastructure decisions, and ultimately guaranteeing the promise that they've made with this short arrival time and departure and getting through security. As part of the technology enhancement, they are adding more communications capabilities, including allowing passengers to access flight status directly on their phone through apps that they already have there through Facebook Messenger. So in this particular app, they get real-time status updates on flight changes or gate changes directly through their smartphone. They have automated check-in and bag drop-offs using common check-in stations throughout the airport to weigh and tag baggage and pay for any excess right then and there. And similar to the beta testing, beta buttons concept that Sean mentioned, the airport has feedback stations that they have embedded and added throughout all different areas of the airport so they can collect real-time feedback to allow the airport staff to correct issues very quickly. And one particular example, they can, if they see that a dissatisfied button is pressed in a bathroom area 3 times in the space of 15 minutes, they will automatically send a text message to the appropriate staff, and they will go and take care of the issue in the bathroom and get it in a clean state. In addition to all of these enhancements, they're also undergoing a lot of development enhancements to the facilities, adding new gates and security lanes, adding capacity, ultimately creating a better experience and an environment that is pleasing to customers. In the future, their goal is to use all of the data that they're collecting, the crowd sensing data, as well as the feedback to roll out other enhancements that will help passengers manage their own experience with the airport using smart apps to check the status of different lines of security, to manage their preferences, or even to pre-order food as they're coming into the airport. As a result of all of these efforts, they have been able to deliver on their promise of a speedy passenger journey and even beat it in many respects. They have reduced check-in time to as little as 55 seconds, getting through security in less than 10 minutes, and guaranteeing that departure time. Once you land at the airport, you're out the door and on to where you need to go 15 minutes after you do land. These enhanced experiences are also paying off in other ways as well. The airport hosted a record-breaking 4.5 million passengers in 2016, which was a 5% year-over-year growth. They continue to add new routes, more flights to existing routes, and also new carriers. And all of these enhancements and changes are adding up to a lot of happy customers and passengers. Other airports in the industry is taking notice as well. The London City Airport was recently named as the best regional airport in the world by the Center for Aviation.
So, really interesting cases. One of the things that I noticed in listening to those two is just how deliberate they were. This was not just something that they went out and said, we're going to improve one experience or something, but they stepped back and looked at the whole experience in a very deliberate way and then went about improving it. So I think you guys have kind of come up with some tips, right? 10 key tips for, getting into and really redesigning experiences. Go ahead. Tell us what to do.
All right, so I'll kick off. Thanks, Pat. The first one is to embrace design thinking and methods. So this concept of human-centered design has been around for many years. It's not a new thing, but it is relatively new to CX, and it's only recently that CX companies and CX practitioners have started thinking about how can we take some of the frameworks and approaches from a design thinking approach and actually apply that to what we're doing in the field of customer experience. So if you want to create CX innovation, at some point you're going to need to become familiar and comfortable with the idea of design thinking. And that actually may be something where you have expertise within your organization today, just in a different department or a different group. But that certainly is one thing we think would be an important starting place.
I'll go ahead and take the second one. So this one is really about leveraging or aligning any of these new CX experiences with your company's brand identity and the promises, and using those brand promises as a foundation for new ideas that come up, or CX ideation and concepts. So those new designed experiences really must be aligned and adhered to the promises that you've communicated to your customers.
Okay, so number 3 is creating a deep understanding of your customers' needs. And I personally think it's really hard to walk a mile in your customer's shoes by looking at NPS scores or sending out 100,000 5-minute web surveys, or even looking at the typically brief and not that helpful verbatim comments that customers provide in a typical survey. I think building empathy is key to designing new experiences, as we saw with both of those examples. And as we talked about with Marriott, it really requires an ethnographic approach. So that's qualitative, but it's also observational. It means really shadowing and following and looking at and understanding your customers when they're actually in the moment of interacting with your company.
So number 4, benchmarking to identify best practices. This is really about broadening your horizon and looking for inspiration and ideas both inside and outside of your industry. Just replicating what your competitor is doing isn't going to be enough to deliver a differentiated customer experience. And oftentimes, in examples that we just shared today, the enhanced customer experiences in the B2C space can even be used and applied in the B2B space to make it more seamless and personal and more interactive.
All right, so number 5 is building strategic relationships, and what we mean by that is developing the personal connections and forging the alliances with key stakeholders across your organization, so cross-functional, across departments. That's critical to making an innovation-driven vision become a reality in your organization. One of the things with the Marriott case study is they formed what they would call a tiger team, but a cross-functional team very early on that included members from across functions like operations, design, construction, food and beverage, all the different functions that interact directly or indirectly with the guest throughout their journey.
Tip number 6 is to leverage resources that you already have. Leverage your employees to co-create and define what an ideal customer experience would look like. This is often an untapped source for CX professionals, particularly in the innovation area. And employees are often SMEs. And if they're brought in early to help redefine and redesign how customers interact with a company, they may be more likely to help support what ultimately gets built. Plus, like Sean mentioned, if you can engage more employees across the different functional areas, that can also help break down organizational silos, help create some visibility and awareness on how customers engage and how those different silos can impact how they're interacting with you.
All right, tip number 7 is to embrace prototyping and rapid iteration methods. So creating innovation is really something that doesn't require a perfectionist mindset. The mindset's more around embracing rapid and iterative methods, things like agile development and design sprints. And that's really a change, I think, for a lot of people in the CX industry today. You know, a lot of times we're focused on data and perfection, and even when we're talking about improvement initiatives, we want to get it 100% right before we roll it out to customers. But that's not what this is about. This is about almost the opposite. Let's not be afraid to fail, but let's get ideas out there quickly and iterate on them before we lose the potential for gaining a competitive advantage.
Tip number 8 is really about making sure that there is a process for consistent deployment that's intentional across the organization. So things like developing a CX charter or design principles that are aligned with the brand identity, all of those things can serve as a North Star for CX innovations, ideas, testing things out, while also increasing engagement among employees and promoting a culture that is focused on CX.
All right, penultimate tip number 9 is not letting it get complacent or stale. So once a new experience has been designed and launched, it doesn't have an infinite lifespan or shelf life. A lot of times companies become complacent. There can be a loss of focus on innovation, and that can undo all of the hard work that's happened up to that point, because changes in customer expectations combined with competitor actions will almost inevitably reduce or eliminate CX differentiation unless you keep things moving. I think one of the examples going back to the hotel space, the idea of being able to unlock your hotel door with your smartphone, very cool idea when it was first launched by the Hilton brand. Now it's becoming more widely available across hotel brands, less of a differentiator today than it may have been 2 or 3 years ago.
And last but not least, the flexibility and the willingness to change. We as CX professionals must be willing to try new things. And that doesn't mean just repeating the same survey or tracking the same measure. And it's not to say that that's not important, but trying out some of these other elements, the ethnographic research, observations, and all of these other things can help us think more broadly and outside the box and ultimately drive towards creating a more differentiated customer experience.
So excellent tips. I guess if I take anything away from it, it's this, is, you know, those of us in CX that have been really more focused on listening, on, you know, how we conduct surveys or gather insights through forums and other things, that it's really evolved to be a lot more than that. And that really we're being called upon to be a catalyst in many cases, to be a leader within the organization, to drive, you know, big changes that are going to make a difference in our company. So with that, we have we've got a few minutes for a few questions. We did get one in from Sophie, and before I list it, I should point out, we intentionally today kind of drifted from our normal approach of having mostly B2B examples, and we offered some really B2C examples, mainly because it's something we can all be familiar with and understand. But her question is, these are cases in B2C, what about B2B? So let me throw that out. I mean, it is tricky, and whether it's B2B or B2C, some are more mundane. Are there opportunities for this type of breakthrough in those industries?
Yeah, I can take that one. There definitely are, and I think, in fact, the opportunity is even greater for B2B than it might be for B2C. If you think about the whole idea of design thinking and building differentiated design approaches, it started more in the physical space with objects, then it went into the interaction space with services, and as we saw with some great consumer examples. But B2B, all of the interactions, if you're a B2B company that you have with your customers, all of those are experiences that may be subpar or just okay today. And if you don't take a look at those, particularly those that are key moments of truth, and really evaluate, are those areas that we could differentiate from the competition, then you're at a huge risk of somebody else coming into your market, disrupting it. Could be an existing competitor that rethinks the experience, or a new competitor. Just as we've seen, in the technology space with the emergence of cloud, there are many examples of particularly new companies that rethink the customer experience from a B2B standpoint and create huge market share gains as a result.
I mean, we all have experiences, right? It's a matter of really looking at it and trying to figure out how do we really make it the best it can be. All right, second, what about, again, this is kind of new to a lot of CX professionals. Where do you start with all this? I mean, you touched on some of it in the tips, but are there other places that you'd suggest starting?
Yeah, Pat, I can take this one. So, I think a lot of it is getting people on board with this idea that CX innovation, or that innovation can be about the customer experience and not just about product innovation. Starting to build out some of those messages and start to connect to different groups within the organization to build those strategic relationships that Sean had touched upon earlier. I think the other piece that would be good to start is trying to understand a little bit more and create empathy with your employees about how customers do interact with your company from start to finish along their journey, and really walk a mile in their shoes. So creating journey maps of them and understanding what the current state is, the ideal state, observational research like the ethnographic, those kinds of things can help open up the door to better understand how customers are interacting with you, so then you can go and take it the next step further to decide how you want to change.
All right. Well, Sean and Diane, thank you for taking the time to put these thoughts together and share them with everyone. As you can see on the screen, we do have the resources. This is the website where you get it. We'll follow up with an email as well to provide you this link. Also, I mentioned the report that we highlighted at the last webcast, but if you weren't able to attend that, you can get a complimentary copy by going to this site. You can also link to it from that resource site that we just provided. And if you use the discount code, you'll get a complimentary copy. Also, even though it's months away, I want to let you know about our upcoming summit. So we do an annual customer experience summit. We've moved it to September this year, and it will be in San Antonio. And the website is active. We have all the breakout sessions listed that we have planned, and we're about ready to list our keynote sessions. So I throw it out at this early stage because I know a lot of people at the beginning of the year are kind of looking at their schedule and saying, hey, I want to go to a conference this year, which one? Well, particularly if you are a B2B company, we really feel this is the one for you. So we hope you consider that. And we'll talk more about it in future webcasts as well. Speaking of that, our next webcast is Thursday, February 16th. We're going to talk about learning from employees about your customer, or many of us call this VOCE, or Voice of the Customer through the Employee. At our last summit last year, we had a series of different discussion groups, and this was the most popular discussion group at our event. And so we thought it was an appropriate one to dig into a little bit deeper. With that, again, I'll thank Diane and Sean for joining us. If you have questions, please feel free to email any of us, or like we talked earlier, if you want some more examples specifically of B2B companies, something like that, we're happy to help out with that. And I'll remind you that this is a production of Walker. We are a customer experience consulting firm, and we offer analytics, technology, expert advice, and end-to-end project management. And if you have a need for those services, we hope you'll keep us in mind. Thank you, and we hope to talk to you next month.